The New Earth geomancy was inspired by and is in some ways an update of Alice Bailey's work in The Destiny of the Nations, written after Second World War 1949. At that time, both pessimism and optimism were in the air. The United Nations had recently been founded, and Alice Bailey put much trust in the possibility of the UN being the vehicle for the unification and positive fulfillment of the destiny of the nations. Particularly significant in the destiny of the nations is the idea of the influence of different astrological signs or planetary bodies, and even the seven rays, upon specific cities or nations. This notion is among the most fertile presented in the book, illustrating that the destinies of the nations are bound with the particular astrological sign that governed them. For example, Bailey says Australia is governed by Virgo. Though this idea may be outdated, it remains highly provocative. Bailey peers through a cosmic lens at the influence of the planets on Earth, and at Earth as being a repository of different planetary programs, which is similar to the ideas of traditional astrology. Rather than the astrological perspective, cosmic history takes the heliospheric perspective of the planets. In the astrological perspective, planets have meaning according to what particular constellation they happen to be moving through and what particular house they happen to be in. As we enter the time of the noosphere, our consciousness becomes the mind of the Earth. This is a different mental geography than we are familiar with. This is the psychogeography of the Earth, our new mental foundation. Read on about the New Earth geomancy. Geomancy, literally divination by signs or by means of the Earth itself, is an ancient art and science. In China it is known as Feng Shui, winds and water, and has much to do with finding auspicious sites and or orientations in nature. However, the New Earth geomancy is not just what is happening on the surface of the planet, but consciously engages the internal workings of interplanetary forces. From the heliospheric perspective, planets are arranged and interpreted according to their orbital position in relation to the Sun. As we have seen from the previous chapter, there are different Bode numbers that indicate the various types of frequency ratios that the planetary orbits hold in relation to each other, to the Sun, and to the whole. The notion of a planetary grid traces back to Plato, who conceived the Earth as being shaped like a dodecahedron ball. R. Buckminster Fuller further developed the idea and laid out a dodecahedron on the world map, and even made dodecahedron globes. In the 1970s, Russian scientist Kirill Lachugin conceived of the Earth as a giant crystal structure. This crystal structure creates a grid that is constructed of an icosahedron integrated with a dodecahedron. This model was adopted by American researchers Bill Becker and Beth Higgins and developed as Planetary Grid System, 1983. The specific new Earth geomancy grid system, Planet Holon, was discovered by Valum Votan in 1986. Inspired by Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion dodecahedron world map, the planet Holon is a 20-unit geometrical design overlaid on a Becker-Higgins planetary grid. This was first known as the Arcturus Protectorate Zone and later as the planet Holon. As a harmonic frequency grid to stabilize the dissonance of the Earth's biopsychic field, the Arcturus Protectorate Zone is divided into 20 zones that correspond with the seals of the Mayan calendar. Each of the 20 zones contain a solar seal that belongs to either galactic karmic or solar prophetic interplanetary flow. Each seal corresponds to a planet, either in its position in the galactic karmic flow or in its position in the solar prophetic flow. Each planet has 2 seals. Each flow is divided into 2 chromatic runs of 5 seals each, which diagonally span the planet from North Pole to South Pole. The planet Holon is a pure projection from the AA Midway Station and serves as a 4th-dimensional etheric protective grid around planet Earth. The AA Midway Station serves as an intergalactic telepathic supervisor that focalizes this particular grid onto planet Earth. This grid can be followed daily in 20-day sequences, sun to storm. The Holon grid is also divided into 5 horizontal zones, Earth families, which have particular functions with corresponding attributes. The grid creates 5 horizontal zones. Each of the zones are activated with equal frequency in the 20-day runs. When consciously directed by human thought force, higher interplanetary frequencies can penetrate the chaotic frenzy of happenings on Earth. This structure makes up the skeleton of the 4th-dimensional body of the planet. By consciously activating this grid, slowly but surely, the higher 4th-dimensional frequency will moderate and help lay a foundation for the emergence of a new order or state of being, the noosphere. Through contemplation of this planetary grid, we can better grasp as galactic citizens the various levels and methods of the new Earth geomancy. In time, we may even be chosen to become the new planetary shamans, the diviners of the Earth, whose science and knowledge is based on the telepathic engagement of the planet Holon, Arcturus Protectorate Grid. The galactic karmic flow runs from Pluto to Mercury, and the solar prophetic flow runs from Mercury to Pluto, accommodating the 10 planetary orbits. The yellow sun seal corresponds to galactic karmic Pluto at the North Pole, the red moon seal to galactic karmic Mercury at the South Pole. The white dog seal corresponds with solar prophetic Mercury at the North Pole, and the blue storm with solar prophetic Pluto at the South Pole. There are 4 runs that go diagonally from the upper left to the lower right. Each flow has 2 parts. One part takes us to the midpoint of the solar system, Jupiter and Maldek, and the other takes us to the end of either the solar or galactic spectrum, Mercury and Pluto. There are 3 levels to consider when working with a new Earth geomancy. 1. Outermost. 2. Plate tectonics. 3. The core. These 3 components define a whole system for the reactivation of Earth as a living, evolving being. This is the level of the electromagnetic field, the Van Allen radiation belts, In particular, the Cybank noosphere, with its division into 4 plates, or 8 seasonal divisions, 4 in the north and 4 in the south. The 8 seasonal plates are further divided into 24 nimboid membranes, 6 per seasonal plate. Each of the nimboid membranes is coated by one of the 24 Elder Futhark runes. By studying the color patterns of the different seals, we can see how each of these nimboid plates is affected by the planet Holon in its color formation. The plates belong to the outermost aspect, the etheric form of the Cybank located in between the outer and inner Van Allen radiation belts. It is here that the programs from the solar binary sunspot cycle first affect the electromagnetic field and are dispersed to the 24 membranes. Consciously directed collective thought force will increase the receptive interactions at this noospheric Cybank level as the information coming in from the binary sunspots hits the electromagnetic field. The noosphere's electromagnetic programs are activated through the psi field, 4 plates and 24 membranes, and channeled through the poles into the Earth, as well as being radiated on the surface level of the Earth. This is the first stage of receiving the information energy from the binary sunspot cycles, the activation of the noosphere's psi information flows. Geomagnetically, the second level is governed by the tectonic plates that create the surface tension of the planet. There are 3 types of tectonic plate boundaries. 1. Divergent boundaries, where the plates are pulling apart. This creates a positive energy, while the next 2 boundary types set off destructive forces. 2. Convergent boundaries, when plates come into collision with each other, like the Chilean fault line and the fault line causing the Baksin Day tsunami in Indonesia. 3. Transform boundaries, when plates slide or grind past each other, such as the San Andres Fault in California. These are the 3 types of boundaries that connect the different tectonic plates. There are about 20 main tectonic plates that are always in motion with a fluid foundation. This creates the surface tension that also contributes to the dynamic of life on Earth. Different types of Earth energies emerge through different plates. The Arcturus Protectorate Grid, indicating the planetary zones of influence, is overlaid on Earth to help stabilize the plates by creatively reconfiguring the biopsychic influence and the psychic field as we know it. The third level refers to the Earth core. At the center of the Earth, there is an outer and inner core. The inner core has a radius of 1,216 kilometers, 19 times 64 DNA code. The octahedral crystal core is inside of this. The 8 facets of the octahedron correspond to the 8-fold division of the 4 psi plates. There is a correspondence and dynamic connection between the octahedral core and the 4 psi plates of the seasons, with which they are in resonance. The dynamic inner core, like a gyroscope, is intended to stabilize the planet. It has an electrodynamic connection to the poles, which receive solar cosmic transmissions that are then stored within the core. There are intermittent points and radial diffusions from the core to the surface, where codes are received and transmitted as information to the different plasmas, and that subliminally affect the consciousness of receptive human beings. The practice of synchrogalactic yoga helps us to tune in to these frequencies. As a collective species, we are transitioning from what Alice Bailey calls the 6th ray of idealism into the 7th ray of ceremonial magic. This transition contributes to the biopsychic tension and dynamic on the surface of the planet. The 6th ray of devotion idealism results in ideological fanaticism, a particular astrological sign that governed them. For example, Bailey says Australia is governed by Virgo. Though this idea may be outdated, it remains highly provocative. Bailey peers through a cosmic lens at the influence of the planets on Earth, and optimism were in the air. The United Nations had recently been founded, and Alice Bailey put much trust in the possibility of the UN being the vehicle for the unification and positive fulfillment of the destiny of the nations. Particularly significant in the destiny of the nations is the idea of the influence of different astrological signs or planetary bodies, and even the seven rays, upon specific cities or nations. This notion is among the most fertile presented in the book, illustrating that the destinies of the nations are bound with the particular at Earth as being a repository of different planetary programs, which is similar to the ideas of traditional astrology. Rather than the astrological perspective, cosmic history takes the heliospheric perspective of the planets. In the astrological perspective, planets have meaning according to the New Earth geomancy was inspired by and is in some ways an update of Alice Bailey's work in The Destiny of the Nations, written after Second World War 1949. At that time, both pessimists